Can you see the slides?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Hello everybody. Good afternoon. All set? Can you
Good afternoon, sir.
Can you hear and see the slides?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
okay. So after cholelithiasis, we'll be discussing another important topic for surgery, that is obstetric jaundice. So it is a very common scenario in surgical practice. In fact, every week we can see at least 3-4 cases of obstetric jaundice in surgical OPD. So in your examination also, this is a very common surgical problem. So during your final MBS examination, you can expect to encounter in your during your examination obstetric jaundice either as a theory question or as a long case in specimen, not exactly specimen, in instruments. You may be given T-tube or you may be given Desjardins cholecystectomy forceps, from which you may be asked about obstetric jaundice. In X-ray, you may get some plates of say MRCP, in which you might find there is stone in the common bile duct. So from there you will ask questions on obstetric jaundice. And also in sometimes in surgical problems, you may be asked about the preparation of a case of obstetric jaundice. So this is one of the very important topic in surgery for final MBS examination. But the other thing is that in standard surgical textbook, you won't find a chapter on obstetric jaundice from which you can read nicely and you can answer questions nicely for your examination. So I think you should be very attentive and listen carefully about the today's discussion. Just a few points regarding the last topic that is discussed today, that is cholelithiasis. I think along with the discussion that you had with Dr. Uttam, please read about the complications of gallstone. Right, this is a very common question asked. So read about complications of gallstone and well, so let's concentrate on obstetric jaundice. So before you get into a patient of obstetric jaundice, certain points you have to remember. Otherwise, you won't be able to make your diagnosis of obstetric jaundice. So remember, the patient may present with either a palpable gallbladder with obstetric jaundice, or patient is not having a palpable gallbladder. Now, if you find a patient of obstetric jaundice with palpable gallbladder, so your probable diagnosis should be either periampullary carcinoma, carcinoma head of the pancreas, gallbladder carcinoma, or carcinoma of the lower end of the common bile duct, or cholangiocarcinoma. And when gallbladder is not palpable, the cause of obstetric jaundice likely to be either cholelithiasis, that is stone in the CBD, or hilar cholangiocarcinoma, that means malignancy or carcinoma arising from the confluence of common bile duct. So these are the on clinical basis. Now on ultrasonographical diagnosis wise, so ultrasonography can tell you about the level of obstruction of the common bile duct. So when you ask for the ultrasonography for diagnosis, so you can say whether the obstruction is at the lower part of the common bile duct or the obstruction at the upper part or proximal common bile duct obstruction. So if it is again lower bile duct obstruction, the causes may be either choledocholithiasis or periampullary carcinoma or carcinoma of the head of the pancreas and lower end of cholangiocarcinoma. If it is proximal CBD obstruction or upper part of CBD obstruction, so likely to be caused are gallbladder carcinoma or hilar cholangiocarcinoma. But another thing aspect you should consider is that for diagnosis of obstructive jaundice is first you will have to diagnose. As you know, there are three types of jaundice. So either it is pre-hepatic jaundice or hepatic jaundice or post-hepatic or obstructive jaundice or surgical jaundice. So obstructive jaundice is also known as surgical jaundice. Why surgical jaundice? Because before the introduction of or before the use of endoscopic interventions, surgery was the only treatment for obstructive jaundice. So that's why it is also called at that time surgical jaundice or post-hepatic jaundice. Now when the patient comes to OPD, so you don't know whether this is a pre-hepatic jaundice or hepatic or hepatocellular jaundice or it is obstructive jaundice. So there are certain clinical symptoms, signs and symptoms from which we can diagnose the case to be obstructive jaundice. So the typical clinical features of obstructive jaundice are: number one is fever with chill and rigor. Excuse me. So either it should be the fever with chill and rigor, itching and clay colored stool. So there are three typical features of obstructive jaundice. So not necessarily all the three symptoms should be present. So if any one of the symptoms present along with jaundice, so we can clinically say that this is a case of obstructive jaundice. So when you suspect the case to be a clinically obstructive jaundice, your next aim would be to confirm the diagnosis of obstructive jaundice by biochemical estimation. That means you have to send the blood for liver function test. So from the liver function test, we can determine that this is a case of obstructive jaundice by looking into several parameters of liver function test. So we'll discuss it later on. Now, in other words, if we consider the common causes of obstructive jaundice, then according to the benign natures, or if it is a benign obstructive jaundice, then common bile duct stone or choledocholithiasis, bile duct stricture, benign bile duct stricture. So these are the two common causes. Other causes, that is intrabiliary rupture of hepatic hydatid cyst or chronic pancreatitis, sclerosing cholangitis, choledochal cyst. So these are uncommon cause of benign obstructive jaundice. And the common causes of malignant obstructive jaundice is periampullary carcinoma, that is the commonest in our country or in this part. Rather, I would say the gallbladder carcinoma. Presently, gallbladder carcinoma is the commonest cause of malignant obstructive jaundice in this part of the country, followed by periampullary carcinoma, carcinoma of the head of the pancreas, cholangiocarcinoma lower end, and rarely the metastatic deposit at the porta hepatis. So these are the, you can classify causes of obstructive jaundice according to benign or malignant nature with this slide. So remember this, there are so many classifications of obstructive jaundice. So either you can classify according to the etiology, or according to malignant or benign, or according to the level of obstruction, whether it is upper part of bile duct or is a mid CBD or the lower part of the common bile duct. So again, to diagnose the cause of, to diagnose the obstructive jaundice, so there are two parts in your diagnosis. One is, first you'll have to say is a case of obstructive jaundice. Secondly, you'll have to say it's due to. So case of obstructive jaundice has two parts. One is diagnosis of jaundice, that is obstructive jaundice in nature, that is not pre-hepatic or hepatic jaundice, and second part is the cause of obstructive jaundice. So you'll have to always say it's a case of obstructive jaundice due to, if you want to say it's a benign cause cholecystolithiasis, or if you want to say it's a malignant cause, so you'll have to say it's a case of obstructive jaundice due to periampullary carcinoma. It goes like this. So from this slide, these are things you'll have to keep in mind to make the diagnosis, right? So if the patient is comparatively young patient and gives a history of passing clay colored stool, fever with Chino-Geiger, pruritus, any one of these three, clinical examination is usually unremarkable except for a few scratch marks. So your diagnosis is probably cholecystolithiasis. So young female patient with features of obstructive jaundice. So probably it will be a case of cholecystolithiasis. Remember, in cholecystolithiasis on clinical examination, gallbladder is not palpable. If the similar type of patients give a history of cholecystectomy and on examination you see there is a cholecystectomy scar, so probably the patient is having a recurrent, benign biliary stricture, postoperative benign biliary stricture, or this could be again a cause of retained CVD stone. That means either the stone was present in the common bile duct before the operation, or a stone has been slipped into the common bile duct during operation. Thereby, in the post-operative period or later on, it presents with obstructive jaundice. And sometimes a patient of gallbladder carcinoma can present following a cholecystectomy, history of cholecystectomy with obstructive jaundice. On the other hand, if the patient is an elderly patient with a history of weight loss and appetite, that means cachectic features with palpable gallbladder, and if the gallbladder is soft in fill or soft to form in consistency, your diagnosis should be periampullary carcinoma. But if you find the gallbladder is hard in consistency with obstructive jaundice, with features of weight loss and loss of appetite, then your clinical diagnosis should be gallbladder carcinoma. Otherwise, other than this, the abdomen will be unremarkable. Sometimes these are also the presentation, that is obstructive jaundice with very hard liver, with ascites, with cachexia. So these are all features of advanced disease or malignant obstructive jaundice. So keeping this in mind, we will be able to make a clinical diagnosis for case of obstructive jaundice. Now, if you again recap what we have discussed so far, is what are the features, clinical features of obstructive jaundice. So clinical features are pain, weight loss, jaundice will be there, clay colored stool, and pruritus. Pain may be also present in both malignant and benign obstructive jaundice, but usually in malignant jaundice, pain is a late feature. So the classical triad, known as Charcot's triad, there is pain, jaundice, and fever. So this typical is known three features combined together are known as Charcot or Charcot's triad. Now, along with this, if the patient shows features of shock and mental confusion, then it is known as Reynolds-Painter. So remember these two things. These are very favorite questions of the examiners. So if in any discussions of obstructive jaundice, examiner will like to ask you what is Charcot's triad or what is Reynolds-Painter. Physical examination usually unremarkable other than the palpable gallbladder. There will be sometimes some few scratch marks. Another important question is Courvoisier's law. Examiners will like to ask you what is Courvoisier's law in case of obstructive jaundice. So Courvoisier's law is, in a jaundice patient, palpable gallbladder is not due to stone in the common bile duct, but due to the obstruction at the lower end of the common bile duct, most likely due to periampullary carcinoma or carcinoma of the head of the pancreas. Why this is not due to stone or due to cholelithiasis? Because why not due to stone in the common bile duct? Because stone in the common bile duct is 99% is a secondary stone. That means the stone has originated in the gallbladder and migrated to the common bile duct. So in choledocholithiasis, 99% cases the gallbladder will be diseased or gallbladder associated with cholelithiasis. Now when there is cholelithiasis, usually the gallbladder wall is thickened. Now thickened gallbladder wall is not capable of distension and thereby it will not be palpable when we do the examination. So this exception is the Courvoisier's law. That means in a jaundice patient, the palpable gallbladder is not due to stone in the gallbladder, but due to obstruction at the lower end of the common bile duct, probably due to periampullary carcinoma or carcinoma of the head of the pancreas.
Sir,
Yes.
sir বলছি রেনল্ডস পেন্টাডে মেন্টাল কনফিউশন কেন থাকবে?
These are features of sepsis. When there is septicemia, the patient, these are the features of extreme severe septicemia, right? So there will be mental confusion and there will be septicemia and features of shock. Right. So once you diagnose the case to be a case of obstructive jaundice due to either malignant cause or benign cause, next part is your confirmation of diagnosis. Remember, when you say a provisional diagnosis, next the examiner will ask you what you're going to do or what is your next step. Then your standard answer should be, sir, I want to confirm my diagnosis by biochemical examination as well as various imaging modalities, imaging techniques. So first thing is the biochemically you have to confirm your diagnosis of obstructive jaundice. Now these are the various diagnostic workup. So we can test the urine. There will be absence of urobilinogen, but the bile will be present. Stool will be clay color stool, or there will be features of steatoria. But most important is the blood test, that is liver function test. So in your undergraduate level, this liver function test is very important because it will ask in examination about the various parameters or components of the liver function test. So it starts like this and this order should be followed. So remember the liver function test in this same order. So first is the bilirubin is seen, total bilirubin, then conjugated and unconjugated bilirubin. So you'll have to remember the values because these are very common investigation and you are supposed to read the or interpret the liver function test with these reports. So in obstructive jaundice, it is expected that the total bilirubin will be increased more than 2 mg/% and of this the conjugated portion will be higher than the unconjugated portion. So otherwise it is known as conjugated hyperbilirubinemia. Total protein will be normal range is 5.5 to 7.5. So this total protein, you'll have to check the total protein level because this protein level will help you to decide the surgical operation is feasible or not. Because if the albumin is low, then patient will not be fit for surgery. So you'll have to improve the albumin level or protein level before we undertake the patient for any surgical intervention. Because if the albumin level is low, during operation there will be chance of cardiac problem, there will be chance of heart failure. Post-operative period, there will be chance of wound infection or wound disruption. So all these issues will be there. So we'll have to correct hypoproteinemia, if any, before the operation. These enzymes, liver enzymes are very important. AST and ALT, these are actually in obstructive jaundice. There is not much changes in this hepatocyte liver for the enzymes. So these are usually not much altered, but in hepatocellular jaundice, as you know, the AST and ALT level will be very much increased. But another important parameters of liver function test is alkaline phosphatase. So actually this fraction is increased in obstructive jaundice. So normal value is 40 to 100 international units. So usually in obstructive jaundice the values are more than 100 international units. And along with that, you'll have to also assess the gamma GT portions of the liver function test. So this gamma GT, alkaline phosphatase, conjugated bilirubin, these are all increased in obstructive jaundice. Other than biochemical test, we'll have to do certain imaging tests in order to see the level of the obstruction of the common bile duct and also see the nature of obstruction. So if you ask why do you want to image or go for imaging investigation, you'll have to say the examiner, sir, I want to see the level of obstruction of common bile duct and also the nature of obstruction of common bile duct. So level of obstruction means whether it is the upper part of the common bile duct, mid part of the common bile duct or the lower part of the common bile duct. And nature of obstruction means whether it is a benign nature, that means whether it is stone or it is a stricture or any other benign pathology like chronic pancreatitis or sclerosing cholangitis. So this may be visible by the imaging investigations. And malignant nature, as we have already discussed, whether it is a periampullary carcinoma or it's a carcinoma head of the pancreas, lower end cholangiocarcinoma, carcinoma gallbladder. So all this will be seen by various imaging techniques. So first, non-invasive imaging that can be employed in obstructive jaundice is the ultrasonography. So ultrasonography, again, if you talk about ultrasonography, there are varieties of various modes of ultrasonography. So normally first investigation that we do is the transabdominal ultrasonography. So ultrasonography can also be done by endoscopic means. So when we do that, that is called endoscopic ultrasonography. It can also be done by during laparoscopic surgery. So it is paraoperative ultrasonography, or it is endoscopic, laparoscopic ultrasonography. These are the various techniques. And other than the abdomen, in rectal region, so transrectal ultrasonography, in vaginal region, the transvaginal ultrasonography. So there are various modes of ultrasonography. So the examiner might ask you what are the various modes of ultrasonography. And next important investigation is the CT scan. Now in hepatobiliary region, MDCT is the preferred modality of CT scan. There are various modalities, various forms of CT scan. That is, one is common direct, that is CHD, just contrast enhanced CT scan. But in hepatobiliary region, MDCT, particularly if you are thinking of malignant obstructive jaundice, so MDCT will be more helpful than the other varieties. MRCP is again another imaging, non-invasive imaging investigation, and this can be more helpful in when you think the cause of obstructive jaundice is due to some benign reasons, that is benign biliary stricture or chronic pancreatitis or stone in the common bile duct. So in this cases, MRCP will be more helpful than MDCT. HIDA scan is another scan which can be employed to assess the cause of obstructive jaundice. PET or PET-CT, these are all adjunct in case of malignant obstructive jaundice. Of the invasive procedures, ERCP can be employed. Remember, the role of ERCP is nowadays very limited, as ERCP should be employed only for therapeutic purpose. Remember, ERCP can be done for both diagnostic and therapeutic purpose. That means by ERCP we can diagnose a case, and during ERCP we can also have some therapeutic interventions. Like if there is stone in the common bile duct, So during ERCP, we can also extract the stone from the common bile duct. That is called therapeutic intervention. So ERCP should only be done when some form of therapy is needed, because ERCP is potentially a dangerous investigations in a sense that it can introduce or precipitate acute pancreatitis, because during ERCP, first is the duct, common bile duct is cannulated with a very fine catheter. Now sometimes this fine catheter may go into the main pancreatic duct. Instead of the common bile duct, it can get into the main pancreatic duct, thereby injuring the main pancreatic duct, and thereby it can initiate acute pancreatitis, which is sometimes life-threatening. So that's why only selectively for therapeutic purpose ERCP is employed, because nowadays we have MRCP and MDCT which are non-invasive, and for diagnosis purpose we can utilize this rather than using ERCP for diagnosis purpose. Other than there is some doubtful, even still sometimes doubt exists regarding the cause of obstructive jaundice, particularly in malignant cases, say for periampullary carcinoma or carcinoma head of the pancreas. So side viewing endoscopy is more useful in doubtful periampullary carcinomas. Percutaneous transhepatic cholangiography, that is important and employed when we suspect there is obstruction at the upper part of the common bile duct or at the confluence level or intrahepatic level. So in such situation, percutaneous transhepatic cholangiography can be employed. Endoscopic ultrasonography, as we just discussed, is again another option for imaging, particularly in doubtful cases of malignant biliary obstruction. So when there is doubtful or malignant biliary obstruction, say there is a very small periampullary or very small carcinoma of the head of the pancreas, which is not visible either in the MDCT or say PET scan or in say by MRCP. So in such situation, EUS, endoscopic ultrasonography, may be helpful, and not only for the imaging, also we can employ fine needle aspiration through the endoscopy guided, and thereby we can make the diagnosis of the pathological condition. In malignant biliary obstruction,
Sir,
yes.
Sir, you told the name of the ultrasound which is done under laparoscopy. Can you please repeat that part?
Yeah, that is one option. Sometimes during laparoscopic surgery, say for there is a liver tumor, right? So in laparoscopy, the conventional intraoperative ultrasonography that we do in open surgery, that is cannot be employed. So during laparoscopic surgery, so there are devices which are introduced through the laparoscope, and from there we can image the say there is a tumor in the liver, there is a small hepatocellular tumors, right? So that can be imaged by using the laparoscopic ultrasound devices. So that is laparoscopic ultrasonography. So when we suspect there is some malignant biliary obstruction, so tumor markers like CA19-9 or CEA is also helpful regarding diagnosis and sometimes regarding prognosis of the disease. And final staging, remember this diagnostic laparoscopy is another option which can be employed for the final staging of the disease, because in spite of all these investigations, sometimes we will not be able to see whether the patient is having any metastatic disease or not. That means sometimes there is a small, say, peritoneal deposits, or there is some sub-centimeter, that means less than 1 centimeter deposits over the liver surface from any primary malignancy, say for carcinoma of the head of the pancreas or periampullary carcinoma. So these small tiny malignant deposits or secondary deposits cannot be picked up by these various imaging modalities. So these can only be seen by the naked eyes, and this we can do that by doing diagnostic laparoscopy. So just before operation, we can just do one laparoscopy to see that if there is any minute sub-centimeter deposits over the liver surface or over the peritoneal surface of the abdomen or not. Because if these are there, if these minute deposits are there, then your total plan for surgery will change. Suppose you are planning for a definitive procedures like Whipple's operations or pancreatorrhinectomy for periampuric carcinoma, or say for carcinoma of the head of the pancreas. But if during diagnostic laparoscopy you see there are small minor deposits, so the patient will not benefit from our definitive procedures, because the life expectancy of this patient will be very small. That means the patient is having advanced malignant disease, and patient will not tolerate such a major operation. So you'll have to change your plan, and then we'll just restore to the palliative procedures that is available. So we'll do minimum so that so long the patient lives, patient is free from the symptoms, and patient have a better quality of life. So that's why the diagnostic laparoscopy is the final staging laparoscopy, and it's very, very important, which can change the course of the treatment for the patient with malignant bile duct obstruction or malignant jaundice. So this is regarding MDCT, that when we suspect that there is obstruction at the lower end of the common bile duct, then we'll have to write pancreatic protocol that is slightly different than when there is upper end obstruction. So we'll go for the triphasic scan. So okay, these are all technical issues, and I think you don't have much time or patience right now to hear about all these things. But if you can remember this, it will be a plus point, and you can write all these things in your theory exam. Now MRCP along with MRI, that is will be employed for benign biliary, for benign obstructive jaundice, which means either for benign biliary stricture or doubtful common bile duct stone or hilar cholangiocarcinoma. Why do I say doubtful common bile duct stone? Because common bile duct stone usually very well picked up by ultrasonography. 95% its sensitivity. Only there are certain disadvantage of ultrasonography for common bile duct stone is that the lower end of the common bile duct cannot be imaged properly due to the overlying gas shadow in the duodenum, because gas is highly echo-reflective. So the ultrasonography cannot see the lower end of the common bile duct. However, with the modern machines, so this disadvantage has become overcome. So modern machines are very good at diagnosis of common bile duct stone, even at the lower end of the common bile duct. Even then, if doubt exists, so we can ask for MRCP with MRI. Now these are few ultrasonography features of obstructive jaundice. So when you say that there is dilatation of the common bile duct in ultrasonography, so if the common bile duct is dilated more than 10 millimeter on ultrasonography, then we can say it is dilated common bile duct. Intrahepatic biliary channels will also be dilated, and we can also see the nature and level of obstruction, that means whether it's benign or malignant, whether it's the upper end, mid CVD or lower end, whether it's a stone or stricture, malignancy of the cavernous head pancreas, metastatic lymph node. So all this can be diagnosed by ultrasonography. Disadvantage is that the lower part of the common bile cannot be seen. In MDCT, it's like a one-stop shop. That means you can diagnose the case, the tumor. You can see the tumor. You can see the location of the tumor. We can assess whether tumor is operable or not. That means if there is no lymph node, large lymph node metastasis, If there is no liver metastasis, if there is no ascites, so then probably this case is operable lesion. And along with that, the vascular anomalies can also be seen, because in hepatobiliary region, vascular anomalies are very common. So if you want to do surgery, so you'll have to be familiar with the vascular anatomy before you undertake the surgery. Otherwise, there will be a chance of injury to the important vessels, particularly the arteries, and which may lead to catastrophic hemorrhage, and patient mortality will be very high. So regarding ERCP, as we discussed before, that ERCP should not be used for diagnostic purpose, so it should be used for only therapeutic intention. Now this is how the dilated common bile duct looks on ultrasonography. So you can see this important, these are two echo-reflective walls. You can see these walls, whitish parts of the wall. So the distance between the two walls, that is measured, and if it is more than say it's more than 6 millimeter actually, then it is said to be dilated. Now regarding the diameter of common bile duct, it is said that if it is more than 6 millimeter dilated, then we can say the common bile duct is dilated. If on ERCP it is more than 8 millimeter, then we'll say the common bile duct is dilated. And during operation, per-operative measurement, if it's more than 10 millimeter, then we'll say the common bile is dilated. Because in ultrasonography, we measure the internal diameter of the common bile duct. And in ERCP, because we are pushing some contrast, so the common bile duct will be little bit distended, so it is 8 millimeter. And during surgery, in naked eyes, we see the outer diameter of the common bile duct, so that's why it is 10 millimeter. So 6, 8, 10, so these are the various measurements in order to say that the common bile duct is dilated, because dilated common bile duct is one important feature of obstruction of the common bile duct or obstructive jaundice. These are the CT features. You can see this is the axial picture of the CT scan. This is the gallbladder, this is the common bile duct, and this is the main pancreatic duct. So when the common bile duct and main pancreatic duct both are dilated, it is called double duct sign, which is a features of periampullary or carcinoma of the head of the pancreas, more commonly of the periampullary carcinoma. So here both the ducts are dilated. This is a picture of ERCP. This is the endoscope. Actually, ERCP, as you know, endoscope is introduced, and through the endoscope, the ampulla viter, the papilla is identified, and then it is cannulated, then the contrast is injected. So here, this one is the dilated common bile duct, and we can't see here the intrahepatic biliary radical, so that means the obstruction is likely to be at the level of confluence. So this is a picture of the ERCP. So this is a picture of the MRCP. You can see here this is the confluence, and just below the confluence there is certain cutoff. So there is obstruction. So this is a distal part of the common bile duct. So this is a typical picture of obstruction at the upper part of the common bile duct in the MRCP. So this is another picture of MRCP, and you can see there are filling defects in the common bile duct suggesting stone in the common bile duct. So this is a picture of MRCP picture of choledocholithiasis. So this is another MRCP picture of choledocholithiasis. You can see this is dilated common bile duct, and there is multiple filling defects suggestive of stone. So this is a post-operative picture. So you can see that is the gallbladder, and these are stones in the common bile ducts which has been extracted up following the operation. So in fact, this is called hepatolithiasis because there is stone in the common bile duct, stone in the left hepatic duct, stone in the right hepatic duct, as you can see here. So this is actually a case of hepatolithiasis. That means when there is stone in the common bile duct as well as right and left hepatic duct. Now few words regarding choledocholithiasis. So it is a stone in the common bile duct. So symptoms, that means Charcot's triad will be there, and maybe on palpation there will be tenderness in the epigastrium and the right hypochondrial scratch mark. So investigations, USG and LFT, of course LFT you will have to see there's a case of obstructive jaundice, and USG will probably confirm the diagnosis because 99% cases it is very sensitive. In doubtful cases we can go for MRCP. Now this is again very important questions, how to prepare a case of obstructive jaundice. So first thing is there is no scope for domiciliary treatment. Patient needs to be hospitalized. So first is hospitalization of the patient, then specific measures, diet, nutrition, adequate hydration, because this patient has anorexia and there does not, sometimes patient have vomiting, so the patients are nutritionally depleted, may be hydrated, so you'll have to correct this with good nutrition and if necessary IV fluid. Broad spectrum antibiotics are needed. Well, certain points you'll have to remember here, that what are the problems that is associated with obstructive jaundice. There are certain systemic changes that occurs following obstructive jaundice, right? In obstructive jaundice, the problem is that the bile cannot come into the intestine, and as because bile is not coming into the intestine, then what happens? That means the bile is one factor which is responsible for the absorption of the fat soluble vitamins. So as the fat soluble vitamins are not absorbed, so vitamin K, of important thing is vitamin K is not absorbed, so there is problem with the coagulation. So that is one problem. The patients are having problem with coagulation. Second problem is that since bile duct is obstructed, the bile contains the gram-negative organisms. So there is proliferation of gram-negative organisms, and when there is proliferation of gram-negative organisms, that means they produce huge quantity of enterotoxins or endotoxins. So during operation, what happens? These endotoxins get absorbed in the system and producing systemic endotoxemia. And also these endotoxins are responsible for occasional cholangitis, that is fever with chill and rigor in case of obstructive jaundice. So we'll have to keep these things in mind, and you will have to take adequate precautions before the operations. Another problem with obstructive jaundice is that this bilirubin sometimes, particularly if the patient gets dehydrated, tends to be deposited into the kidney, thereby blocking the kidney tubules, renal tubules, and patient may go into the renal failure. So that's why it is very important that patient should be hydrated well. The kidney should be flasked so that the patient does not go into the renal failure. And also these patients with obstructive jaundice are very prone to cardiogenic shock, because there is some myocardial depressing factors are present, which causes the reduced contractility of the heart, and there is increased peripheral vascular resistance. So combining both, the patients are more prone to have certain hypotension. So for all this have to be kept in mind before putting the patient into the operation theatre. So that's why the patient needs to be admitted into the hospital beforehand. Diet and the nutrition, hydration, broad spectrum antibiotics, vitamin K to improve if there is any coagulation deficiency, that may be improved. IV mannitol is given. Nowadays there is doubts, some controversy regarding use of IV mannitol. This is used mainly for flushing the kidney to prevent renal failure. And there is some role of oral lactulose, because this oral lactulose binds with the enterotoxins or endotoxins which lies in the intestinal wall, in the mucosa of the intestine. And this oral lactulose binds with the endotoxins, and thereby it is excreted out of the body in the form of a stool. So thereby it reduces the viral load or endotoxin, reduces the endotoxin loads, and therefore the post-operative infection will be less. So these are the specific management for obstetric jaundice. General measures, sometimes it will be helpful if we can reduce the serum bilirubin level, particularly when the bilirubin level is high, say more than 15 mg%. So there are certain measures to reduce the serum bilirubin. If it is a benign obstruction and the patient is having cholangitis, then with the treatment with the antibiotics, so the inflammation and edema of the common bile duct will reduced, and therefore if the stone is there, so stone will get loose in the common bile duct and the bile flow into the intestine will be established. So thereby there will be chance of reduction of the serum bilirubin. But in malignant patients, so there is usually it's a progressive jaundice. So in such patient, sometimes preoperative biliary drainage is employed by means of putting stent in the common bile duct. So that is one area where ERCP is employed. So in ERCP, through ERCP, you can put in a stent into the common bile duct, and thereby the bilirubin level will be reduced, and that will help in patient's management in the post-operative setting. Hemoglobin level should always be more than 10 if you want to plan to undertake any surgical procedures. Avoidance of dangerous drugs, that means the analgesics should be avoided. Sometimes patients are taking too much of analgesics because all these analgesics are excreted through the liver, and the liver is already diseased because overburdened with the bilirubin. So there is a chance of liver failure if the patient continues to take this analgesic drugs. Serum albumin level should be more than 30 gram%. As I said, sorry, not 30 is 3, because that will improve the outcome of the surgery in terms of wound healing, and patient may need IV fluid. Now, if the patient is having stone in the common bile duct, the patient has several options. Patient has several options regarding the treatment. So either the patient can undergo endoscopic treatment, or patient can undergo operative treatment. Operative treatment, again, it may be an open operation or it may be a laparoscopic operation. So if the patient wants to undergo endoscopic treatment, it's fine. So patient will have to have ERCP, and through the ERCP, the stones can be extracted from the common bile duct. Then the patient should be put up for laparoscopic cholecystectomy or cholecystectomy in whatever form. So here I am just going to tell you some steps of choledocholithotomy or operations for choledocholithosis. The steps are more or less same for both open surgery or for the laparoscopic surgery. So part of this is that cholecystectomy has to be done first, because as I said that stone in the common bile duct is mostly 99% is the secondary stone. That means the stone arises from the gallbladder and that migrates to the common bile duct. That means in choledocholithiasis, the gallbladder is also diseased. That means associated cholecystectomy. So cholecystectomy has to be performed always in case of choledocholithotomy. So it is always cholecystectomy with choledocholithotomy. So there is no operations like only choledocholithotomy. So the steps of I'm discussing just about the steps of choledocholithotomy, because cholecystectomy is probably discussed before this lecture. And after performing cholecystectomy, common bile duct is identified by aspiration of bile. So we can see the common bile duct, and then we'll have to, sometimes it is difficult to identify by seeing only. So it has to be confirmed by aspiring bile from the common bile duct. So when you see that this bile, so you know this is a common bile duct, then two stage switches are put over the supraduodenal part of the common bile duct, and then in between the stage switches a small incision first is made there. And you see the bile is coming from the common bile duct. You can sometimes see the stone is peeping from the common bile duct. Bile is aspirated and the bile is sent for culture sensitivity. Always very important step. The bile, aspirated bile should always be sent for culture sensitivity, and then stones. Then the incision is enlarged from on the both sides above and below. Then stones are removed by Desjardins choledochoritomy forceps, and after, when you more or less you are satisfied that all the stones are removed, then CBD has to be irrigated with the red rubber catheter. The catheter is introduced to the common bile duct and it is irrigated, because due to irrigation sometimes some leftover stones may come out in the opening. So these are some steps of choledochoritomy. So this is a common bile duct and it is opened into the supraduodenal portion. These are two stage switches. You can see these are stage switches. These are put, a small incision is made, then it is extended above and below, and then this is Desjardins choledochoritomy forceps, and through this the stones are removed. Then irrigation is given into the common bile duct, so the stones come out. Now once reasonably you are sure that all the stones are removed, so you have various options. If you are lucky enough and if you have the choledocoscope in the operation theatre, you can put the choledocoscope inside the common bile duct and see if there is any leftover stone present or not. So if you, when you are confirmed that there is no more stones in the common bile duct, so then you have the options, various options for closing the common bile duct. So either you can put in a T-tube over the common bile duct and come out, or if there are multiple stones and you are still not sure that all the stones are removed, then you can do choledochoduodenostomy. Or if the stone is impacted in the lower part of the common bile duct, which is sometimes very difficult to take out because it is impacted, and from above, from the supraduodenal portion of the common bile duct, it is not possible to negotiate the stone upwards and take out through the opening in the choledochotomy. So in such a situation, we'll have to do transduodenal sphincterotomy and sphincteroplasty. That means that duodenum has to be opened, and through the duodenum, open duodenum, we'll have to identify the ampulla viter, and we'll have to identify the ampulla viter, then make some incisions over there, cut the sphincters, and then after cutting the sphincter, you'll have to remove the stone. So this operation is known as transduodenal sphincterotomy and sphincteroplasty, but nowadays rarely this is done because this part can be done endoscopically, and through endoscopic sphincterotomy we can do remove stones impacted in the lower end of the common bile duct. So this is just for theoretical purpose. Sometimes in desperate situation you might need to do transduodenal sphincterotomy and sphincteroplasty. So actually this was a video of choledocholithotomy, but video will not play here because of this is the old version of PowerPoint. And this is how the T-tube is placed. So this is T-tube is placed. This is choledochoduodenostomy, that is the duodenum is anastomosed with the choledochotomy incision, and this is transduodenal sphincteroplasty. This is duodenum is opened, then the ampulla viter is seen and cut, the sphincter is cut, and this is known as transdural sphincteroplasty. So if you put in a T-tube, then the T-tube has to be kept for minimum for 5 to 7 days, minimum for 10 days, right? So this is a picture of T-tube cholangiogram, and this is the T-tube, and after 5 to 7 days, we'll have to see the amount of bile that is coming through the T-tube. So if it is less than 300 ml, then we start clamping the T-tube intermittently for next 2 to 3 days. That means for first day for 6 hours, second day for 8 hours, like that. So when it is clamped, we see the patient is experiencing any pain in the abdomen, of if there is an appearance of jaundice, or if the yellow color is of the stool. So if there is no pain, no jaundice, and the stool color is yellow, that means there is no obstruction of the common bile duct. And then we will do one T-tube cholangiogram, and in the T-tube cholangiogram we'll have to see if there is any free contrast is coming to the duodenum or not. You can see here the contrast media is coming to the duodenum freely, and there is no filling defect into the common bile duct. That means there is no leftover stone. So we are ready to take out the T-tube now. But if T-tube cholangiogram picture is like this, you can see there is a filling defect in the lower end of the common bile duct. You can see it here also. So that means there is some stone in the leftover stone in the common bile duct. So in such a situation, we cannot take out the T-tube, because if we take out the T-tube, then bile will spill through the choledochotomy into the intra-abdomen, and thereby the patient will having biliary peritonitis, and patient may go into shock. So this again we'll have to do something in such a situation. Otherwise, if there is no distal obstruction, so we are ready to take out the T-tube. And since there is no distal obstruction, so when you take out the T-tube, the bile will follow its normal natural pathway, and there will be no spillage of bile into the peritoneum. So that's why this is very important to assess whether there is any obstruction or distal obstruction in the common bile duct before you take out the T-tube. So satisfactory T-tube cholangiogram means the IBC intrahepatic biliary channels are not dilated, CBD is not dilated, there is no filling defect, and there is free flow of the contrast media into the duodenum. So when all these conditions are fulfilled, the T-tube is taken out by a smart pull. So remember, sometimes you may be given T-tube in your examination. T-tube, I mean in X-ray plate, X-ray part, you will have to be given a T-tube cholangiogram. So when you are asked to say how do you take out T-tube, so don't say by a smart pull. So you'll have to describe all the procedures. You'll have to describe that you'll have to do one T-tube cholangiogram at the end of 5 to 7 days when the bile to the T-tube has come down to less than 300 ml. Then you will see whether the IHB are dilated or not, CBD is dilated or not, no filling defect, free flow of bile into the duodenum, free flow contrast in the duodenum. So when all these features are met, then we are ready to take out the T-tube. So here are the list of common causes of obstructive jaundice and then treatment, because you don't know what is the cause of obstructive jaundice in your case that you will get in your exam, final image examination. So it is a CBD stone. So either it is a ERCP stone extraction or surgical exploration. In case of carcinoma, head of the pancreas, periampuli carcinoma, lower end of cholangiosia, it is a pancreaduodenectomy or Whipple's operation. In case of gallbladder carcinoma, if it is operable, then we'll have to go for radical cholecystectomy. If it is benign biliary stricture, so patient need Roux-en-Y hepaticojejunostomy. In case of chronic pancreatitis, patient needs surgical bypass or stenting. In case of choleloccal cyst, the excision of cyst followed by Roux-en-Y hepaticojejunostomy. So gallbladder carcinoma as such is not very important for undergraduate students, but However, it is good to know a little bit about gallbladder carcinoma, because if your long case is a gallbladder carcinoma, so you might be asked few questions on gallbladder carcinoma. So I think it's already a very lengthy lecture. So I think you are lacking concentration. So I am skipping this part, but do remember, and in your free time you read about few lines about gallbladder carcinoma. So again, this is a picture of staging laparoscopy in case of gallbladder, in case of carcinoma of the gallbladder. Again, the video is not playing, but you can see here these small nodules are basically metastatic deposits. The white things are basically metastatic deposits, which are not seen in any of the imaging procedures like MDCT or MRCP that is being done for this patient. So in gallbladder carcinoma, the radical cholecystectomy is done. Usually the radical cholecystectomy means part of the the gallbladder along with the part of the liver, the wedge, either wedge 2 centimeter wedge of the liver or segment 4B or 5 part of the liver, that is taken out along with the lymph node of the hepatorenal ligament and the lymph node of around the rectopancreatic region. So this lymphadenectomy plus radical cholecystectomy, that is definitive operations for gallbladder carcinoma. Now, not necessarily all the patients of malignant obstructive jaundice will be a suitable candidate for operations or definitive treatment. Most of the only around 20 to 25% cases of malignant biliary obstruction are suitable candidate for definitive surgical treatment. But majority of the patients will need palliative care or palliative surgery. So you must know a little bit about the palliative measures that are available for malignant obstructive jaundice. So remember one thing, jaundice per se is not an indication for any palliation. That means sometimes the patient will have malignant obstructive jaundice, but patient has no symptoms related to jaundice. That means patient has no itching or cholangitis. So in such a patient, there is no need for any sort of palliation for jaundice. So indications of palliation for jaundice in malignant obstructions are: number one, if the patient is having intense itching. Sometimes itching is so intense that the patient is not able to sleep at night. So in such a patient, the palliation of jaundice will improve the quality of life. So this can be done either means of stent. That means stent can be metallic stent or plastic stent, but metallic stent will be preferable, although costly, because so long the patient lives, usually this patient, advanced case of malignant obstructive jaundice, life expectancy is hardly 6 to 8 months. So long the patient lives, the stent will be patent. Or we can have surgical bypass, that is called bilioenteric bypass. That means common bile duct has to be bypassed with some intestine, that is bilioenteric bypass or Roux-en-Y hepatovaginostomy. If the patient is having gastric outlet obstruction, that means in case of say carcinoma head of the pancreas which has obstruct the duodenum, the patient will have gastric outlet obstruction. So in that case, gastrojejunostomy will be helpful, because otherwise patient will not be able to eat anything and patient will have constant vomiting. Psychiatric counseling is also very important, because most of the patients will be naturally depressed. So psychiatric counseling and medicines may help them. And this is very most important, that record keeping enrollment for clinical trial, because some cases, majority of cases of gallbladder cancer, definitive management is can be given for only a small percentage, or only 5 to 10% of patient we can give definitive management. So we still don't know what are the best options for advanced cases of hepatobiliary malignancy. So only record keeping, various clinical trial and analysis, that may help the treatment options in future. Another clinical entity, that is choledochal cyst. is important for your theory exam. In practical exam, only if you are unlucky, then maybe in some imaging investigations like MRCP, you may be given choledochal cyst. Otherwise, only in theory exam, short note, you can expect short notes on choledochal cyst. So please read about choledochal cyst. Only few things are there. So if you read well, then you can get good marks. So choledochal cyst is more. There are various types of classification of choledochal cyst. So there are Todani classification and there are Todani modification of Olensolis classifications. There are 5 types nowadays. Another one, 6 type is added. So remember the types. And the treatment for investigations are of course imaging, of which MRCP is the best. USG can also diagnose, but MRCP is the best form of investigation. And the treatment is usually the excision of the cyst along with Roux-en-Y hepatojejunostomy. For most of the types of cyst, of this type A and type 4 are the commonest type of presentation, and for both these types, excision and excision of the cyst and Roux-en-Y hepatojejunostomy is the treatment of choice. So this is in short about obstetric jaundice, and if you have any questions, I will be happy to answer.
Hello, sir. I have
Yes, carry on.
Sir, what are the measurements for dilated common bile duct? Can you please repeat that part?
Yeah, it's 6, 8, and 10. 6 for ultrasonography, because in ultrasonography we can measure the internal diameter of the common bile duct. We can't measure the outer diameter of the common bile duct. And 8 millimeter is for the ERCP, because in ERCP we are injecting some contrast, and that's because we inject the contrast, there will be some distension of the common bile duct. So 8 millimeter is taken as the cutoff, because normally it may be 6 millimeter, but when you inject the contrast, there will be distension and it will look like it is dilated. So 8 millimeter is the cutoff mark. And during open surgery, when we see the common bile duct, we are looking at the outer diameter. We don't know what is the inner diameter. So in open surgery, it is considered as the 10 millimeter is the cutoff mark. So how do you know it is 10 millimeter? Because hardly there is anything to measure the common bile duct. So usually the pencil that we used commonly, the outer diameter of a pencil, wooden pencil, is considered as a 10 millimeter. So all of us is quite familiar with the diameter of wooden pencil. So if the common bile duct looks like dilated more than the wooden pencil, so probably it is more than 10 millimeter in diameter. Okay.
Thank you, sir. Yes.
Okay, then we are closing today's lecture. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
For the wonderful